We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Fault Lines. Boone Hargrove stared at the flickering screen of his laptop, his eyes stinging from hours of reviewing architectural blueprints. At 42, he had built Hargrove Designs from nothing into one of Denver's most respected architectural firms. The digital clock on his desk read 11:47 p.m., another late night at the office. His phone buzzed. His mother's nurse, Lena. "Mr. Hargrove, I think you should come. Martha's taken a turn." The weight of those words settled on his chest like concrete. His mother's battle with pancreatic cancer had been brutal. 6 months of watching her wither from the vibrant, strong-willed woman who'd raised him alone after his father abandoned them when Boone was just 8. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, he promised, already shutting down his computer. When Boone entered his modern glass and steel home in Cherry Creek, he found his wife Valencia lounging on their Italian leather sofa, scrolling through her phone, a half-empty wine glass balanced precariously on her knee. At 38, Valencia Prescott Hargrove commanded attention. Her dark hair cut in a severe bob that accentuated her high cheekbones and perpetually appraising gaze. "My mother's worse," Boone said, already heading toward their bedroom. "I need to go to the hospice." Valencia didn't look up. "It's almost midnight, Boone." "She's dying, Val." This finally drew Valencia's gaze from her screen. "Dying people do that at their own pace. You've been at her bedside every night this week." Boone paused, hand on the banister. "She raised me alone after Dad left. Everything I am, everything I've built." "I've heard this story," Valencia interrupted, setting her wine glass down with deliberate care. "What about Kinsley's wedding? Have you finalized your RSVP for the rehearsal dinner next week?" Kinsley, Valencia's younger cousin. They'd grown up together after Valencia's parents took in Kinsley when her mother died. The upcoming wedding had consumed Valencia's attention for months. "I've been a little preoccupied with my mother's cancer," Boone said, unable to keep the edge from his voice. "Family obligations go both ways, Boone," Valencia replied coolly. "The Prescotts have welcomed you for 15 years. Something in her tone made Boone pause. The Prescotts had never truly welcomed him. Valencia's family, old Colorado mining money that had transitioned smoothly into tech investments, had always viewed Boone as beneath them, a scholarship kid from the wrong side of Denver who'd somehow trapped their golden daughter. "We'll talk tomorrow," he said, too exhausted for another circular argument. As he changed clothes, he checked his messages. There was one from Dax Caldwell, Valencia's cousin's fiancé's best man. "Hey man, need your input on the bachelor party. Call me." Boone frowned. He barely knew Dax, a smooth-talking commercial real estate developer who'd entered their social circle 6 months ago and quickly charmed everyone, especially Valencia. At the hospice, he found his mother sleeping fitfully, her once robust frame now skeletal beneath the thin blanket. Lena, the night nurse, touched his shoulder gently. "The doctor says it could be days or hours," she said softly. Boone nodded, taking his mother's papery hand in his. "I'm here, Mom." Martha Hargrove's eyes fluttered open, cloudy with morphine, but still the same deep blue that Boone saw in the mirror every morning. "My boy," she whispered, her voice a rasp. "No tears. I raised you stronger than that." Boone swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am. That wife of yours, she come with you?" Boone hesitated. Martha had never warmed to Valencia, had seen through her polished veneer from their first meeting. "She had a long day," he offered weakly. Martha's lips twitched, still making excuses for her. She squeezed his hand with surprising strength. "Promise me something, Boone. When I'm gone, look at your life with clear eyes. Really look. Mom, promise me." "I promise," he said, kissing her forehead. She nodded, satisfied, and drifted back to sleep. Boone settled into the chair beside her bed, prepared for the long vigil ahead. When he returned home at dawn, he found Valencia's side of the bed undisturbed. A text on his phone read, "Stayed at Kinsley's. Wedding emergency. Talk later." Boone collapsed onto the bed, fully clothed, too exhausted to question it. For the next week, Boone divided his time between the hospice, his office, and an increasingly empty home. Valencia flitted between wedding preparations and mysterious family obligations that kept her away at odd hours. "You need to confirm about the rehearsal dinner," Valencia insisted during one of their brief encounters in the kitchen. "Kinsley's wedding is important." "My mother is dying," Boone replied, the words hollow from repetition. Valencia slammed her hand on the counter. "Life goes on, Boone. Do you think I enjoy planning these events alone? Do you think I wanted to choose between my family and your—" She stopped abruptly, something calculating in her expression. "My what?" Boone asked quietly. "Nothing," she said, gathering her purse. "I'm late for the florist." That night, Boone's phone rang at 2:17 a.m. Martha Hargrove had taken her last breath while he dozed in the chair beside her, her hand still in his. The following days passed in a fog of funeral arrangements and condolence calls. Valencia maintained a perfect appearance of the grieving daughter-in-law in public, but at home, her focus remained fixed on Kinsley's upcoming wedding. "The funeral is Saturday," Boone said, looking up from his mother's obituary draft. Valencia froze. "This Saturday?" "Yes." "Boone, that's Kinsley's wedding day." He stared at her, disbelieving. "My mother just died. Kinsley has been planning this for a year. The Prescott family will all be there. You know how important family is to me after how I grew up." The irony wasn't lost on Boone. Valencia rarely spoke to her parents except when she needed something. "I'm burying my mother on Saturday," he said with finality. Valencia's face hardened. "Then you need to make a choice, Boone. Right now. A choice. Me or your dead mother." Her voice was cold, detached. "That's the ultimatum. Choose." Boone felt something fundamental shift inside him, as if tectonic plates were realigning. In that moment, he saw Valencia clearly for the first time, not as the woman he'd fallen in love with, but as she truly was. "I choose to honor my mother," he said quietly. Valencia's smile was tight. "Then I'll see you when you get back." But something in her eyes told Boone he might not. Chapter 2. Hollow Grounds. The day of Martha Hargrove's funeral dawned crisp and clear, the Colorado sky an impossible blue. Boone stood stoic as the modest crowd of his mother's friends, his colleagues, and a few distant relatives gathered around the grave. Conspicuously absent was Valencia. She had left the previous evening with 3 suitcases and a cool kiss on his cheek. "Give my condolences to everyone," she'd said, as if departing for a business trip rather than choosing a wedding over her husband's grief. Hudson McCall, Boone's oldest friend and business partner, stood beside him at the graveside, a solid presence in the void Valencia had left. Hudson, with his weathered face and hands calloused from years of construction before he'd become Boone's head project manager, was everything the Prescotts looked down upon, and everything Boone valued. "She would have hated all this fuss," Hudson said as the minister concluded the service. Boone nodded, a ghost of a smile crossing his face. "She told me to cremate her and scatter the ashes from a cheap airplane, but I couldn't do it." "Martha deserved the best," Hudson agreed, then hesitated. "Speaking of absent spouses—" "At the wedding," Boone said shortly. Hudson's expression darkened. "That's cold, even for Valencia." "It's fine," Boone said automatically, the response conditioned by years of making excuses for Valencia's behavior. His mother's voice echoed in his mind. "Look at your life with clear eyes." After the funeral, a small reception was held at Boone's home. As the last guest departed, Boone found himself alone in the vast, silent house that had never really felt like home despite its perfect design and expensive furnishings. He poured himself 2 fingers of his best scotch, a tribute to his mother, who'd appreciated good whiskey, and raised his glass to her photograph. "I'm looking, Mom," he whispered. "I'm finally looking." Restless, he wandered through the rooms, noticing for the first time how few traces of himself existed in the space. Everything bore Valencia's stamp. The stark modern furniture, the monochromatic color scheme, the carefully curated art that impressed rather than inspired. In their home office, he opened his laptop to check emails, but found himself staring at their shared calendar instead. The notification for Kinsley's wedding glared at him, but what caught his eye was an entry from 3 months ago, DC trip, that he didn't recall. Frowning, he scrolled through previous months, finding more trips and appointments he knew nothing about. A pattern emerged, gaps in Valencia's schedule that coincided with her family obligations and girls' nights. A heaviness settled in his stomach. Almost against his will, he opened their shared cloud storage, scrolling through photos. There were dozens from events he'd missed due to work or caring for his mother. And in several, Valencia stood close to Dax Caldwell, the best man, their body language intimate in a way that couldn't be dismissed as friendly. In one photo from a dinner Boone vaguely remembered declining, Valencia's hand rested on Dax's thigh beneath the table, barely visible but unmistakable to a husband's eye. The scotch turned bitter in his mouth. His phone pinged with a notification from their home security system. Someone had disarmed the front door. Boone stood, expecting Valencia, perhaps return to check on him after the funeral. Instead, he heard unfamiliar footsteps and male voices. Moving silently to the top of the stairs, he watched in disbelief as two men he'd never seen before began efficiently packing Valencia's designer vases and artwork. Mrs. Hargrove said to be careful with the coon's sculpture. One said, wrapping the small, garish piece Valencia had insisted was an investment. Boone stepped into view. "I believe you're mistaken. I'm Mr. Hargrove." The men froze. The older one pulled out his phone. "I have the work order right here. Mrs. Valencia Hargrove authorized removal of her personal property." Boone descended the stairs slowly. "While I was at my mother's funeral." The men exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Look, man, we don't want trouble," the younger one said. "We're just doing our job. May I see the list of her personal property?" Boone asked, his voice dangerously calm. The list was extensive. Nearly everything of value in the house, including pieces Boone had purchased before he'd even met Valencia. "Put it all back," Boone said quietly. "Sir, our orders. Put it back, or I call the police and report a robbery in progress." Boone's tone left no room for argument. "My name is on the deed to this house, and the receipts for most of these items." After the movers departed, Boone methodically checked every room. Valencia's clothes were gone, along with her jewelry, personal items, and, he discovered with a hollow laugh, the contents of their joint safe, including the emergency cash and the diamond tennis bracelet he'd given her for their 10th anniversary. He checked their joint accounts on his phone, drained to the minimum balance. The magnitude of Valencia's betrayal was breathtaking. This wasn't an impulsive decision. This was a calculated exit strategy executed while he grieved. His phone rang. "Hudson, you need to check social media," his friend said without preamble. Boone opened Instagram to find his feed flooded with photos from Kinsley's wedding. In every shot, Valencia glowed with happiness, and in the background of several, barely noticed but unmistakable to Boone's searching eye, stood Dax Caldwell, watching Valencia with proprietary satisfaction. The final photo, posted by Kinsley herself, showed the wedding party. Valencia stood on the groom's side, her arm linked with Dax's. The caption read, "Couldn't imagine my special day without my soul sister at Valencia Hargrove and her special friend at Dax Caldwell Real Estate by my side. Hashtag family first." Boone closed the app, a strange calm settling over him. The pain was there, certainly. 15 years of marriage discarded for a man she'd known less than a year, but alongside it grew something colder and more focused. "You seeing this?" Hudson asked, still on the line. "I see everything now," Boone replied. Chapter 3, Aftermath. The weeks following his mother's funeral and Valencia's departure unfolded in a surreal rhythm of professional obligations and private reckonings. Boone maintained a stoic facade at Hargrove Designs, channeling his energy into the firm's most challenging project, the renovation of Denver's historic Wainwright building. At home, he systematically reclaimed his space, donating Valencia's remaining possessions to charity and redecorating with pieces that reflected his own taste: warm woods, comfortable leather, and his mother's carefully preserved antique desk, the one piece of furniture Valencia had always relegated to the basement. The divorce papers arrived 3 weeks after the wedding, delivered by a courier to his office. Valencia wanted nothing from the house. She'd already taken what she valued, but demanded half his business, claiming her social connections had been instrumental in Hargrove Design's success. "She's delusional," Hudson said when Boone showed him the papers. We built this company on your designs and my construction experience, not our cocktail parties. Boone nodded, but behind his composed expression, questions multiplied. How long had Valencia been planning this? How much of their marriage had been genuine? And Dax, what was his role in all this? The answers began arriving in unexpected ways. First came Melody Winslow, a junior architect Boone had hired the previous year. She requested a private meeting, visibly nervous as she closed his office door. I need to tell you something, Mr. Hargrove, she said, twisting her hands. About Mr. Caldwell. Dax, it seemed, had approached Hargrove Designs 6 months earlier, ostensibly interested in commissioning the firm for a luxury condominium development. During preliminary discussions, he'd taken a particular interest in Melody, inviting her to private consultations that quickly became inappropriate. When I refused his advances, he became interested in your wife instead, Melody said, eyes downcast. I should have told you sooner, but Mr. Caldwell implied he could ruin my career. Boone thanked her for her honesty, assuring her that her position was secure. After she left, he sat motionless, absorbing this new piece of the puzzle. The next revelation came from Imani Blackwood, Valencia's personal assistant of 3 years, who resigned unexpectedly, leaving a sealed envelope on Boone's desk. Mr. Hargrove, I can no longer in good conscience work for Mrs. Hargrove. For the past 8 months, I've been asked to facilitate meetings between your wife and Mr. Caldwell, including booking hotel rooms and creating false itineraries to cover her absences. I've also been instructed to transfer funds from your joint accounts to a private account in Mrs. Hargrove's name. Enclosed are records of these transactions and correspondence that may be useful in your divorce proceedings. I'm deeply sorry for my role in this deception. Imani Blackwood. The enclosed documents painted a damning picture. Valencia and Dax had been involved for nearly 8 months, beginning shortly after he'd approached Hargrove Designs. More disturbing were emails suggesting that Dax had targeted Valencia specifically for her connection to Boone, with references to accessing HD accounts and leveraging the Hargrove name. Boone's attorney, Lucille Barnes, reviewed the evidence with clinical detachment. This changes our position considerably, she noted, her silver hair catching the light as she organized the documents. With proof of infidelity and financial misconduct, Ms. Prescott's claims against your business are substantially weakened. Prescott, Boone questioned. Lucille looked up, her expression carefully neutral. She's filed to restore her maiden name. The paperwork came through yesterday. Something twisted in Boone's chest. Not pain, exactly, but recognition of a final severance. The divorce proceedings moved quickly after that. Faced with the evidence Imani had provided, Valencia's attorney proposed a settlement. Valencia would relinquish all claims to Hargrove Designs in exchange for a lump sum payment significantly smaller than her initial demands. Take it, Lucille advised. It's clean, it's quick, and it lets you move forward. Boone agreed, signing the papers with a steady hand. 15 years of marriage dissolved in a black ink signature. That evening, alone in his reclaimed home, Boone allowed himself a moment of grief, not for the loss of Valencia, but for the death of the future he believed in. His phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. I heard about the divorce settlement. Dax was counting on Valencia getting half your business. Plans changed. Imani. Boone sat up straighter, suddenly alert. Something in Imani's wording suggested there was more to the story than a simple affair. He spent the night reviewing the documents she'd provided, this time looking beyond the personal betrayal to the patterns beneath. Dax's appearance in their lives had coincided with Hargrove Designs securing the Wainwright renovation, the most prestigious project in the firm's history. The email exchanges between Dax and Valencia referenced blueprints, security specifications, and the big score. By dawn, a disturbing theory had formed in Boone's mind. He called Hudson. I need everything we have on Dax Caldwell's background, he said without preamble. And I need to know if anyone's accessed the Wainwright files. 3 quiet months passed. The divorce was finalized with minimal fanfare. Boone immersed himself in work, his focus razor-sharp. The hollow feeling that had consumed him after Valencia's departure gradually transformed into something more purposeful, a determination to understand the full scope of her betrayal and, perhaps, to balance the scales. He rarely checked social media, but occasionally Hudson would update him on Valencia's new life. Lavish trips with Dax, a new penthouse in Denver's most exclusive building, carefully curated posts about new beginnings and authentic living. Then, on a rainy Tuesday evening, as Boone worked late at his mother's desk, his phone rang. Valencia's name appeared on the screen. For a moment, he considered ignoring it, but curiosity and something darker prompted him to answer. Boone. Valencia's voice was smaller than he remembered, stripped of its usual confidence. I need to talk to you. I believe our attorneys handled all necessary communication, he replied evenly. Please, she said, the word unfamiliar from her lips. My family abandoned me. Boone leaned back in his chair, a bitter laugh escaping him. Funny, you made the same choice I did. Silence stretched between them, charged with unspoken recriminations. Things with Dax, they're not what I expected, Valencia finally said. He's not who I thought he was. And who did you think he was, Valencia? The man who'd help you take half my company? The man who approached my firm months before he coincidentally met you? That Dax Caldwell. Her sharp intake of breath told him he'd struck home. What are you talking about? Her voice quavered. I know everything, Boone said quietly. About the affair, the money you took, and what you two were planning with the Wainwright project. Boone, I don't know what you think. Stop lying, he cut her off. It's over, Valencia. You made your choice. You don't understand. Desperation crept into her voice. Dax has information. Things that could hurt you, hurt your business. If you don't help me, he'll what? Destroy me? Boone's voice remained calm, but a cold anger burned beneath his words. Let me be very clear. If either of you comes after me or my company, I will make sure you both regret it for the rest of your lives. Is that a threat? Valencia's familiar indignation surfaced. No, Boone replied. It's a promise. He ended the call, staring at the rain tracing patterns down the window. Valencia's desperation confirmed his suspicions. Whatever Dax had planned, it was unraveling, and Valencia was being cut loose. His phone pinged with a text from Valencia. You'll regret this. We both know how to hurt you. Boone set his phone down, a plan crystallizing in his mind. For 3 months, he'd been gathering information, building a complete picture of Valencia and Dax's scheme. Now it was time to use it. He opened his laptop and began to type. Chapter 4. Unraveling Threads. Bradford Skip. Wainwright 3 sat across from Boone in the exclusive Denver club, his weathered face serious beneath a shock of white hair. At 73, Skip remained one of Denver's most influential property developers, his family name synonymous with the city's architectural heritage. I appreciate your discretion, Boone, Skip said, his voice a gravelly rumble. My father would roll in his grave if he knew what almost happened to his building. Boone nodded, sliding a folder across the polished table. These security modifications should prevent any similar vulnerabilities. I've personally overseen every detail. The Wainwright building renovation had nearly become the perfect cover for an elaborate heist. The historic structure housed several high-end jewelry stores in its main atrium, including Rothschild's diamonds, Denver's premier jeweler, and a repository for several $1 million worth of merchandise. Hard to believe your ex-wife was involved, Skip mused, reviewing the documents. Always seemed like such a class act. Appearances can be deceiving, Boone replied neutrally. What he didn't share with Skip was how he discovered the plot. Painstaking review of the documents Amani had provided, coupled with a thorough investigation of Dax Caldwell. The man had operated under 3 different names in the past decade, leaving behind a trail of investment scams and property frauds, always disappearing before charges could be filed. His pattern was consistent. Charm his way into wealthy social circles, identify valuable targets, and exploit inside information. In Valencia, he'd found a perfect accomplice, status-conscious, materialistic, and married to an architect with access to secure building plans. Well, you've turned a potential disaster into a security upgrade, Skip said, closing the folder. That's the Hargrove touch, finding opportunity in crisis. After their meeting, Boone walked through downtown Denver, the late autumn sunshine warming his face. 6 months had passed since Valencia's departure, and the raw wound of betrayal had evolved into something more calculated, a chess player's patience, positioning pieces for the perfect endgame. His phone rang. Hudson. They're making another move, his friend said without preamble. Caldwell just approached Riverbend Development about that medical complex design we've been bidding on. Boone smiled thinly. Right on schedule. The trap he'd been setting was elegant in its simplicity. After thwarting their Wainwright scheme, Boone had allowed strategic information to leak. Hints that Hargrove Designs was pursuing a major contract with Riverbend Development. In reality, the leak was bait, carefully crafted to exploit Dax's predictable methods. Should I be worried? Hudson asked. Not at all, Boone assured him. Let Caldwell think he's found another angle. Keep me updated on his movements. That evening, Boone received an unexpected visitor. Melody Winslow stood on his doorstep, clutching a portfolio case, her expression uncertain. I'm sorry to disturb you at home, Mr. Hargrove, she said, but I think you should see these. Inside the portfolio were preliminary designs for a medical complex, strikingly similar to confidential concepts Hargrove Designs had developed for their Riverbend bid. Dax Caldwell approached me last week, Melody explained, her voice steady despite her obvious discomfort. He offered triple my current salary to join his new development company and bring these designs with me. Boone studied the young architect's face. And you're telling me because loyalty matters, she said simply. After how you stood by me during the initial Caldwell situation, I couldn't betray that trust. Boone nodded, surprised by the unexpected ally. What did you tell him? That I needed time to consider his offer, Melody replied. He gave me until Friday. A plan formed in Boone's mind. What if you accepted? Melody's eyes widened. You want me to spy for you? I want you to help me understand exactly what Caldwell is planning, Boone clarified. With your permission, we could modify these designs, include subtle flaws that wouldn't be apparent without construction experience. A Trojan horse, Melody said slowly, professional interest kindling in her eyes. Exactly. Caldwell lacks the technical expertise to spot the issues. By the time they're discovered, his credibility with Riverbend would be destroyed. Melody considered this, then nodded decisively. I'm in. As she left, Boone felt the first genuine satisfaction he'd experienced in months. The pieces were aligning perfectly. The next phase required a different approach. Valencia might have abandoned their marriage, but she'd left behind a network of social connections that proved unexpectedly valuable to Boone's plans. Marlena Castillo, the wife of Riverbend CEO and former friend of Valencia's, had always shown a particular interest in Boone, one he'd scrupulously avoided during his marriage. Now, he accepted her invitation to the Denver Art Museum's annual gala. Boone Hargrove, Marlena purred, air-kissing his cheek at the event. I'd heard rumors you'd become a recluse. Reports of my social death have been greatly exaggerated, he replied with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Throughout the evening, Boone moved through the crowd with newfound purpose, renewing connections and gathering intelligence. He learned that Valencia and Dax had begun to develop a reputation for lavish spending and equally lavish promises that somehow never materialized. Between us, whispered Judith Wainwright, Skip's daughter-in-law, there are questions about where their money is coming from. That penthouse doesn't pay for itself. Valencia received a settlement in our divorce, Boone offered neutrally. Judith's perfectly arched eyebrow spoke volumes. Not that kind of settlement, darling. Later, as he prepared to leave, Marlena cornered him near the coat check. Carlos mentioned your bidding on the Riverbend project, she said, referring to her husband. Odd coincidence. That new man of Valencia's approached him last week with a similar proposal. Boone affected mild surprise. Dax Caldwell, I wasn't aware he had architectural experience. He doesn't, Marlena confirmed, stepping closer than strictly necessary. But he claims to have innovative designs and financial backing from overseas investors. Carlos is intrigued. The architectural world is full of intriguing proposals, Boone said carefully. Not all of them structurally sound. Marlena laughed, a sound like crystal chiming. I'll be sure to mention that to Carlos. Perhaps you could elaborate over dinner sometime? Boone smiled politely. Business discussions are always more productive over a good meal. As he drove home, Boone reflected on how differently he now navigated the social world Valencia had once dominated. Where she had sought validation and admiration, he sought information and leverage, each conversation a potential resource for his developing strategy. The next morning, Boone received a text from an unknown number. Phase 1 complete. Caldwell took the bait. Meeting set for Thursday with RB execs. Melody was proving to be an exceptional asset. He made a mental note to consider her for a partnership track once this situation was resolved. Another piece fell into place that afternoon when Lucille called. "You were right," his attorney said, an unusual note of admiration in her voice. Valencia Prescott has applied for a business loan using Hargrove Design's financial histories as supporting documentation. Forgeries? Boone asked, though he already knew the answer. Excellent ones, Lucille confirmed. If you hadn't warned me to watch for this, they might have passed inspection. Have you notified the bank? Not yet. As you requested, we're documenting everything before taking action. Boone thanked her and ended the call, satisfaction settling over him like a well-tailored suit. Valencia and Dax were becoming predictably desperate, making exactly the moves he'd anticipated. That evening, as Boone reviewed the modified Riverbend designs Melody had prepared, his doorbell rang. He opened it to find Imani Blackwood on his doorstep, her usual composure fractured by obvious distress. "Mr. Hargrove," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "I need your help." Imani had been hired by Dax's new development company, only to discover they'd used her name and professional credentials to secure permits and approvals without her knowledge. When I confronted Mr. Caldwell, he threatened to implicate me in financial irregularities during my time working for Mrs. Prescott, she explained, sitting rigidly on Boone's sofa. He has documentation, emails I never sent, approvals I never gave. Forgeries, Boone said. He's becoming quite prolific. Imani's dark eyes studied him. You don't seem surprised. Let's just say you're not the first person Dax has tried to manipulate this way, Boone replied. I've been tracking his methods. For what purpose? Imani asked directly. Boone considered his response carefully. Let's call it corrective action. A slow, understanding smile spread across Imani's face. And would this corrective action have room for another participant? One with comprehensive knowledge of both Caldwell and Prescott's operating methods. For the first time in months, Boone felt something close to genuine amusement. I believe it would. By month's end, Boone had assembled a small but effective team. Hudson's construction expertise, Melody's architectural talents, Imani's insider knowledge, and his own strategic vision. Each brought unique skills to what Boone now thought of as the restoration, not of his marriage or former life, but of balance and justice. Their timing proved fortuitous. Valencia's desperate call came just as the final elements of Boone's plan were falling into place. My family abandoned me, she'd said, her voice breaking. What she didn't know was that Boone had already met with James Prescott, Valencia's father, providing carefully selected evidence of how his daughter and Dax had attempted to use the family name to secure fraudulent loans. The Prescott reputation has survived 3 financial crashes and 2 world wars, the elderly patriarch had said, his face grim. I won't let these adventures tarnish generations of integrity. After Valencia's call and subsequent threat, Boone gathered his unlikely allies in his home office. They're getting desperate, he informed them, laying out what he'd learned. Which means they'll be more dangerous, but also more careless. What's our next move? Hudson asked, leaning against the bookcase. Boone smiled, the expression containing no warmth. We spring the trap. Chapter 5, The Gambit. The Denver Business Journal's headline was understated but devastating. Questions arise over Caldwell development financing. The accompanying article detailed how several investors had filed complaints regarding misrepresented opportunities and missing funds. Boone read it over his morning coffee, satisfaction warming him more than the beverage. The investigation he'd quietly instigated through Skip Wainwright's banking connections was bearing fruit faster than anticipated. His phone chimed with a text from Melody. Riverbend execs requested emergency review of Caldwell Designs after article. Structural flaws discovered. Meeting canceled. Another piece falling perfectly into place. Boone's strategic patience was paying dividends. Rather than confronting Valencia and Dax directly, he had methodically undermined the foundations of their operation, their reputation, their financial resources, and now their business prospects. It's like watching dominoes fall, Hudson commented when Boone showed him the article. You push one, and the rest follow. The trick is knowing which domino to push first, Boone replied. That afternoon, he met with Carlos Castillo, Marlena's husband and Riverbend CEO, at the man's request. I'll be blunt, Hargrove, Carlos said once they were seated in his minimalist office. We nearly made a catastrophic mistake with Caldwell Development. Their designs were fundamentally flawed. The support calculations alone would have caused regulatory nightmares. Boone maintained a neutral expression. The construction industry attracts opportunists with glossy presentations and little substance. Precisely why I'm offering the medical complex contract to Hargrove Designs, Carlos continued. Your reputation for structural integrity and attention to detail is exactly what this project requires. Boone accepted with appropriate gratitude, knowing the contract would secure his firm's financial position for years to come, and knowing that Dax would learn of it within hours. The response came that evening, a barrage of texts from Valencia, alternating between threats and pleas. You sabotaged Dax's Riverbend deal. We know it was you. Dax is furious. You don't know what he's capable of. Please, Boone, we need to talk. Things are falling apart. If you don't help us, Dax says he'll release information about Hargrove Designs that will destroy everything you've built. Boone read the messages with detached interest, noting the escalating desperation. He replied to none of them. Instead, he called Lucille. It's time for Phase 2, he instructed his attorney. File the fraud charges against Caldwell Development and send the evidence of forged financial documents to the banking commissioner. And Valencia? Lucille asked. Boone hesitated only briefly. Include her as a co-conspirator. The documents clearly show her involvement. After ending the call, Boone sat in his mother's chair, running his fingers along the worn wood of her desk. Looking with clear eyes, he murmured to himself. The next morning brought another headline. Caldwell Development under investigation for financial fraud. Former Hargrove spouse named as co-conspirator. Boone was reviewing the article when his security system alerted him to someone at the door. The camera showed Valencia, alone and clearly distressed, her usual immaculate appearance noticeably disheveled. He considered ignoring her, but curiosity won out. He opened the door, but blocked the entrance. What do you want, Valencia? She looked up at him, her mascara smudged beneath red-rimmed eyes. Can I come in? Please. No. Boone said simply. Valencia flinched as if he'd struck her. Boone, you have to help me. Dax says he's changed. He says the fraud investigation is your fault, that you set us up. Did I? Boone asked mildly. The things they're saying about me in the papers. My family won't even speak to me. My father's frozen all my accounts. Dax is talking about leaving the country. The words tumbled out in a panic stream. If you just tell them I wasn't involved. But you were involved. Boone interrupted. The forged loan applications with my company's financial data? The attempts to steal Hargrove Designs through Melody? The planned Wainwright jewelry heist? You were an active participant, Valencia. She paled. How did you? No. Boone finished for her. I know everything. Every email, meeting, plan you and Dax made to exploit my business and my connections. It wasn't my idea, she protested weakly. Dax convinced me. Stop. Boone's voice was quiet, but carried an authority that silenced her instantly. You made your choice, Valencia. You chose Dax over me. You chose schemes and shortcuts over integrity. You chose to betray not just our marriage, but everything I've built. What are you going to do? She whispered. Boone studied her. This woman he'd once loved, now revealed as a stranger. Nothing. I've already done it. The rest will unfold on its own. What does that mean? Panic edged her voice. It means you should be very careful about your next moves, Boone advised. And you should choose your allies more wisely than you've done so far. As if summoned by his words, a sleek black SUV screeched to a halt at the curb. Dax Caldwell emerged, his handsome face contorted with rage. "Get in the car, Valencia," he shouted. "Now!" Valencia hesitated, looking between the two men, her past and her present colliding on Boone's doorstep. "He's using you," Boone said quietly. "He always has been." "I said get in the car." Dax advanced up the walkway, his movements aggressive. Valencia backed away from Boone. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though whether to Boone or herself wasn't clear. She turned and hurried to the SUV, Dax's hand closing around her arm with visible force as he guided her into the vehicle. Before following her in, Dax fixed Boone with a venomous glare. "This isn't over, Hargrove. Not by a long shot." Boone watched them drive away, then turned back to his house, pulling out his phone. He sent a brief text to Hudson. They took the bait. Tracked the SUV. The pieces continued to fall. By afternoon, Imani had confirmed that Dax and Valencia had withdrawn large sums from several accounts before the banking freeze could take effect. By evening, Melody reported that Dax had contacted her again, offering an opportunity to join them in an unspecified international venture. "He's planning to flee," Hudson concluded during their strategy meeting that night. "With whatever funds they can salvage," Boone agreed, "which is exactly what we want them to do." The final phase of his plan required Valencia and Dax to believe they were escaping, to gather their remaining resources in one place, making them easier to target. The following day brought the catalyst Boone had been waiting for. Federal investigators, acting on evidence Lucille had provided, issued warrants for both Valencia and Dax on charges of financial fraud, document forgery, and conspiracy. Boone watched the news report with grim satisfaction, then made a call to Skip Wainwright. "They'll be moving tonight," he said without preamble. "Is everything in place?" "My security team is ready," Skip confirmed, "though I'm still not clear on how you know their exact plans." Boone smiled to himself. "Let's just say I understand how desperate people think." What he didn't share with Skip was that Melody, playing her role to perfection, had suggested to Dax that the Wainwright building security would be minimally staffed that night due to a systems upgrade, creating an opportunity for one last score before they fled the country. In reality, the building would be ringed with security personnel and federal agents, alerted by an anonymous tip about a potential heist attempt. As night fell, Boone gathered with Hudson in a surveillance van near the Wainwright building, watching feeds from security cameras Imani had access through her connections. "Are you sure about this?" Hudson asked, his weathered face serious in the blue light of the monitors. "Once they're arrested for attempted robbery on top of the fraud charges, there's no coming back for either of them." "They made their choices," Boone replied, watching as a familiar SUV appeared on one of the screens. Now they faced the consequences. The next hour unfolded like a precisely choreographed dance. Valencia and Dax entered the building through a service entrance, using access codes Melody had provided. They made their way to the jewelry store, disabling what they believed were the primary security systems. What they didn't know was that Skip Wainwright's security team was tracking their every move, allowing them to progress just far enough to establish clear intent. "It's almost too easy," Hudson commented as they watched Valencia stand lookout while Dax worked on the jewelry store's locks. "People see what they want to see," Boone replied. They wanted to believe they had one last chance to score big before disappearing. The end came swiftly. As Dax breached the final door, lights flooded the area. Security personnel and federal agents converged from multiple directions. On the monitors, Boone watched Valencia's face crumple in realization, while Dax frantically looked for an escape route that didn't exist. As they were led away in handcuffs, Valencia's gaze lifted directly to one of the security cameras. Though it was impossible for her to know he was watching, Boone felt the weight of her stare, the dawning comprehension that none of this was coincidence or bad luck. It was design. His design. "It's done," Hudson said quietly. Boone nodded, emotions he couldn't quite name washing through him. Not satisfaction exactly, nor happiness, but perhaps the closest thing to peace he'd felt since finding his house empty after his mother's funeral. Let's go home, he said. Chapter 6, Reconciliation. The glass walls of the Denver Downtown Detention Center visiting room reflected Boone's image back at him as he waited. 3 months had passed since Valencia and Dax's arrest. Their case had become a minor sensation in local media. The society woman and her lover caught in an elaborate fraud and robbery scheme. The door opened, and Valencia entered, escorted by a guard. Prison had not been kind to her. Her designer clothes had been replaced by an orange jumpsuit. Her carefully maintained hair now hung limp, and the confident posture he'd known for 15 years had collapsed into something hunched and defensive. She sat across from him, studying his face with wary eyes. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said finally. "I wanted to understand," Boone replied simply. Valencia's laugh was bitter. "Understand what? How your brilliant trap worked. How you systematically destroyed everything I had. Congratulations, Boone. You won. That's not why I'm here." She looked away, hands fidgeting on the table. "Why then?" "I want to know when it started," Boone said. "Not the affair with Dax, but when did our marriage become something you could discard so easily?" Valencia was silent for a long moment, her expression shifting through a complex series of emotions. "It wasn't easy," she finally said, her voice barely audible. "And it didn't start with Dax." She looked up, meeting his gaze directly for perhaps the first time since her departure. "It started with your mother." Boone frowned. "My mother? She never liked me," Valencia continued. "From the beginning, she saw through me in a way no one else did. Not even you. Especially not you." "Saw through what?" Valencia's smile was sad. "The act, Boone. The perfect wife, the social connector, the supportive partner. I played that role because I thought it was what I wanted: status, security, respect. And it wasn't. I was suffocating," she admitted. "Every year, I felt less real, more like a character I'd created. When your mother got sick and you spent all that time with her, I was relieved. I had space to breathe, to remember who I was before I became Mrs. Hargrove." "And who was that?" Boone asked, genuinely curious. Valencia shrugged. "I don't think I ever knew. That was the problem. When Dax appeared, he seemed to see something in me beyond the role I played. He made me feel alive, reckless, real. He saw a useful tool," Boone corrected gently. "Someone with connections he could exploit." "I know that now," Valencia acknowledged, a flash of the old sharpness in her eyes. "I'm not stupid, Boone. I've had 3 months in here to figure out exactly how Dax manipulated me, and how thoroughly you outplayed us both." She leaned forward. "What I still don't understand is why you're here now." Boone considered his answer carefully. "My mother's last request to me was to look at my life with clear eyes. I've spent the past year doing that, seeing the truth about our marriage, about you, about myself. And," Valencia prompted when he paused, "and I realized I've been looking backward at the betrayal, at what was lost. I came here to look forward instead," Boone explained. To close this chapter properly, Valencia studied him, her expression softening slightly. "You've changed." "We both have," Boone agreed. "Though perhaps I've changed by becoming more authentically myself. While I destroyed myself trying to be someone else," Valencia finished for him. "First your perfect wife, then Dax's perfect accomplice." A tear slipped down her cheek, which she quickly wiped away. "I don't expect your forgiveness, Boone. What I did to you, especially during your mother's death, was unforgivable. I didn't come here to forgive you," Boone said honestly. "I came to understand and to tell you that I'm moving forward. The divorce is final. The criminal cases are proceeding, and my life is continuing." Valencia nodded slowly. "And Dax?" "Facing additional charges," Boone informed her. "The investigation expanded to include his activities in 3 other states. He's still claiming I masterminded everything," Valencia said, a bitter twist to her mouth. "His attorney is trying to portray him as influenced by the vengeful ex-wife of a prominent businessman." "Is that why you asked to see me? For help with your case?" Boone asked directly. Valencia looked surprised. "I didn't ask to see you." Now it was Boone's turn to be confused. "I received a visitor request form with your signature last week." Understanding dawned in Valencia's eyes. "Dax, he must have forged it again. He's desperate to make a deal." "What kind of deal?" Information in exchange for leniency, Valencia explained. He claims to have evidence about your business practices that would interest prosecutors. Boone smiled slightly. Let him try. Hargrove Design's records are impeccable, as my ex-wife's attorneys discovered during our divorce proceedings. Valencia actually laughed, a genuine sound that momentarily transformed her face back into something recognizable. You really did think of everything, she said, something like admiration in her voice. Not everything, Boone corrected. I never saw the collapse of our marriage coming. I never imagined you'd choose a stranger over 15 years together. Valencia's expression sobered. I made a terrible choice, Boone. I've lost everything. My freedom, my family, my future. But the worst part is knowing how much I hurt you when you were already suffering. For the first time, Boone sensed genuine remorse beneath her words. Not manipulation, not self-pity, but authentic regret. What will you do when this is over? He asked. Valencia looked startled by the question. I'll be in prison for years, Boone. Eventually, it will end, he pressed. What then? She considered this, her gaze drifting to the window and the slice of sky visible beyond. Start over, she said finally. Somewhere new, under my own name, building something real this time. Boone nodded, standing to indicate the visit was ending. I hope you find what you're looking for, Valencia. As he turned to leave, her voice stopped him. Boone, for what it's worth, which isn't much, I know, I am truly sorry about your mother. She deserved better from me. Yes, Boone agreed quietly. She did. Outside the detention center, Hudson waited in his truck, windows down to catch the spring breeze. How'd it go? He asked as Boone climbed in. Better than expected, Boone replied. I think I can finally let it go now. And Dax's supposed evidence. Boone smiled. Non-existent. Just another desperate play. As they drove through downtown Denver, Boone gazed up at the Wainwright building, its historic facade now beautifully restored under Hargrove Design's guidance. The project that had been the catalyst for so much destruction had ultimately become a symbol of rebuilding. You know, Hudson said, following his gaze, Skip Wainwright is talking about commissioning us for their Phoenix property next. Expansion possibilities, Boone mused. Exactly what your mother always wanted for you, Hudson reminded him. To build something that would outlast both of you. Boone nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. The revenge that had consumed him for months now seemed less important than the future taking shape before him. That evening, as he sat at his mother's desk reviewing preliminary sketches for the Phoenix project, his phone rang, an unknown number. Mr. Hargrove? A female voice asked when he answered. This is Patricia Wilson from Denver Social Services. I'm calling about Kinsley Prescott's children. Boone frowned in confusion. Kinsley's children? Yes, sir. You're listed as an emergency contact in their file. Ms. Prescott and her husband have been in a serious car accident, and the children need temporary placement while family arrangements are made. The irony was almost too perfect. The cousin whose wedding had been Valencia's excuse, now needing his help. I'll be there within the hour, Boone said, already reaching for his keys. Some choices, he reflected as he drove toward the social services office, were simpler than others. Some bridges couldn't be rebuilt once burned, but others could be constructed where none had existed before. New connections, new possibilities, new directions. As he pulled into the parking lot, he caught sight of two small children waiting inside, clutching stuffed animals, their faces a study in confusion and fear. Boone thought of his mother's final words to him. Look at your life with clear eyes. He was finally ready to do just that, not just at what had been lost, but at what could still be built. Chapter 7, New Foundations. Laughter echoed through Boone's previously silent house as 8-year-old Jason Prescott raced down the hallway, followed closely by his 6-year-old sister Emma. No running inside. Boone called after them, unable to keep the smile from his voice. 6 months had passed since the night he'd brought Kinsley's children home. What was supposed to be a temporary arrangement while she and her husband recovered from their accident. 2 months later, when Kinsley was released from the hospital to begin extensive rehabilitation, the children had remained with Boone at her request. They talk about you constantly during visits, she'd explained from her wheelchair. They've had so much instability, if you're willing to keep them until Drew and I are back on our feet." Boone had agreed without hesitation. The children had brought unexpected light into his life. Their resilience in the face of uncertainty, a daily reminder of his own capacity for adaptation. "Uncle Boone," Emma called, using the title they'd adopted by mutual agreement. "Jason's hiding my science project again." "Am not," came the muffled response from behind the sofa. Boone sighed dramatically, setting aside the house plans he'd been reviewing. "Jason Prescott, if Emma's volcano model isn't on the kitchen table in 30 seconds, I'm rethinking our Saturday museum plans." The model appeared almost instantly, Jason offering a sheepish grin as he carried it carefully to the designated spot. "Sorry," Emmy mumbled. Boone watched them with a mixture of amusement and something deeper, a sense of purpose he'd been missing even before Valencia's departure. His mother would have loved these children, he thought, with their curious minds and resilient spirits. The doorbell interrupted his reflections. "I'll get it," both children shouted simultaneously, racing toward the door. "After you check who it is," Boone reminded them, the security precautions now second nature after the events of the past year. Jason peeked through the peephole, then turned with a grin. "It's Miss Melody." Melody Winslow entered carrying a large portfolio case and a box of cupcakes that immediately diverted the children's attention. "Kitchen first," Boone directed, hiding his pleasure at seeing his now-partner architect. "Hands washed before cupcakes." As the children scampered away, Melody set her portfolio on the coffee table. "The Denver Arts Commission approved our proposal," she announced without preamble. "Hargrove Designs will be creating the new performing arts complex." Boone's smile was genuine. "Your proposal, your design won them over." Melody shook her head, dark curls bouncing with the movement. "Our design, your structural innovations, my aesthetic vision. We're a good team, Hargrove." The word team resonated more deeply than perhaps she intended. Since promoting Melody to partner, Boone had found himself increasingly appreciative of her straightforward manner and creative intellect. Their professional compatibility had gradually evolved into a friendship that hinted at potential for more, though neither had taken steps in that direction. "We should celebrate," Boone suggested. "Dinner tomorrow? I can ask Hudson to watch the kids." Something flickered in Melody's expression. "Hope, perhaps, or caution. Just the two of us?" "Unless you'd prefer the children's commentary on our work processes," Boone replied lightly. Before Melody could respond, his phone rang, Kinsley's Rehabilitation Center. He excused himself to take the call, returning moments later with a thoughtful expression. "Everything okay?" Melody asked. "Kinsley's being released next week," Boone explained. "She and Drew have found an accessible apartment near his parents in Boulder. So the kids will be going home," Melody concluded. Boone nodded, surprised by the hollow feeling the thought created. "It's what we've been working toward." "You'll miss them," Melody observed, her perception uncomfortably accurate. "They brought something back to this house I didn't realize was missing," Boone admitted. "But they need their parents, and Kinsley and Drew deserve to have their family reunited." The conversation shifted to professional matters as they reviewed the arts complex plans, but the impending departure of the children lingered in Boone's mind like an approaching storm. Later that week, as he helped Jason pack his books and treasured raw collection, Boone found himself struggling to maintain his composure. "Will we still see you, Uncle Boone?" the boy asked, his expression serious beyond his years. "Of course," Boone promised. "Boulder isn't far. We'll have visits and adventures." "But it won't be the same," Jason persisted, his intuition cutting to the heart of the matter. Boone sat on the edge of the bed, considering how to respond. "Change isn't always easy, Jason. But it's part of life, sometimes difficult, sometimes wonderful, always teaching us something new." Jason nodded solemnly. "Like when Mom and Dad had their accident, and we came to live with you. That was scary, but then it was good." "Exactly like that," Boone agreed, ruffling the boy's hair. "Emma says you were married before, but your wife left," Jason said abruptly, with a child's directness. "Was that a hard change?" Boone hesitated, then decided on honesty within appropriate boundaries. "Yes, it was very hard, but if it hadn't happened, you and Emma might never have come stay with me." Sometimes the hardest changes lead to the most unexpected gifts. Jason seemed to accept this, returning to his packing with renewed purpose. The day Kinsley and Drew arrived to take the children home was both joyful and bittersweet. The family reunion brought tears and laughter, the children excitedly showing their parents around the house that had been their temporary home. "We can never thank you enough," Drew said privately to Boone, his arm still in a cast from the accident. "Kinsley told me how you stepped up without hesitation, even with everything else you were dealing with." Boone shook his head. "They helped me as much as I helped them." As the family prepared to leave, Emma threw herself into Boone's arms with abandon. "I drew you something," she whispered, pressing a folded paper into his hand. "Don't look until we're gone," Boone promised, his throat tight as he helped load their belongings into Kinsley's adapted van. The final goodbyes were chaotic and emotional, with plans for visits already being scheduled as the van pulled away. The house felt cavernous in their absence. Boone wandered through rooms that had vibrated with energy for months, now silent except for the echo of his footsteps. In the kitchen, abandoned art supplies and a half-finished puzzle remained as evidence of the life that had temporarily animated his home. He unfolded Emma's drawing, a carefully rendered picture of Boone with the children standing in front of his house. Above them, floating in a cloud, was a woman with Boone's blue eyes, watching over the scene. Grandma Martha, Emma had labeled the figure, though she'd never met Boone's mother. Below the drawing, in Emma's careful printing, "Thank you for being our safe place." Tears he hadn't allowed himself blurred his vision. Boone placed the drawing carefully on his mother's desk, then pulled out his phone and made a call. "Hudson, I need to talk about the Phoenix expansion. I'm thinking we should modify the plans." The following morning, Boone met with his core team, Hudson, Melody, and Imani, who had joined Hargrove Designs as operations director after the resolution of the Caldwell situation. "I want to repurpose the top floor of the Phoenix design," Boone explained, spreading revised plans across the conference table. "A transitional housing center for families in crisis, medical emergencies, temporary displacement, situations where children need stability while adults navigate challenges." His team exchanged glances. "That's a significant change to the commercial space allocation," Imani noted, ever practical. "How do we justify it to investors?" "We don't," Boone replied. "Hargrove Designs will fund it separately through a new foundation I'm establishing, the Martha Hargrove Foundation for Family Stability." Hudson whistled softly. "Using your mother's inheritance this way, she'd be proud, Boone." "It's perfect," Melody agreed, studying the plans with a professional eye. "We can create a supportive environment without the institutional feel of most emergency housing. Private family units, communal spaces, even a learning center for the children." As they discussed logistics and implementation, Boone felt a growing certainty that this was the right direction, not just for the project, but for his life. The revenge that had consumed him after Valencia's betrayal had served its purpose, clearing away what was broken to make room for something new to be built. That evening, Boone's dinner with Melody shifted from professional celebration to personal conversation as they lingered over dessert at one of Denver's most exclusive restaurants. "Why architecture?" Melody asked, twirling her wine glass thoughtfully. "You never talk about how you chose this field." Boone considered the question. "I grew up in a series of rundown apartments after my father left. My mother worked 2 jobs to keep us housed, but our living conditions were always precarious." He paused, memories surfacing that he rarely examined. "When I was 12, a water pipe burst in the wall of our bathroom. The landlord took weeks to fix it, and the apartment developed black mold. My mother got sick, respiratory issues that plagued her for years afterward." "That's terrible," Melody said softly. Boone nodded. "I became obsessed with understanding how buildings work, how they're supposed to protect people, not harm them. I started drawing improved versions of our apartment, designs with better ventilation, safer materials." "So you became an architect to create better spaces for people like your younger self," Melody concluded. "That was the beginning," Boone acknowledged. "Later, I discovered the creative aspects, the joy of designing something both beautiful and functional. But at its core, my work has always been about creating safe spaces." The The parallel to Emma's drawing wasn't lost on him. "What about you?" he asked, deflecting attention from the unexpected vulnerability of his answer. Melody smiled. "My story is less profound. My father was a construction foreman who brought home blueprints. I was fascinated by the language of lines that could become real structures. By 8, I was redesigning our house on graph paper. Child prodigies, both of us," Boone joked. As they left the restaurant, the comfortable silence between them felt significant, a recognition of something evolving beyond professional respect. "The foundation is a wonderful idea," Melody said as they walked toward her car. "After everything that happened with Valencia and Caldwell, you could have retreated into bitterness. Instead, you're creating something meaningful." Boone stopped walking, turned to face her. "Do you know what my mother said to me before she died? Look at your life with clear eyes." Melody waited, sensing there was more. "For months, I thought that meant seeing Valencia's betrayal clearly, understanding the manipulation," Boone continued. "But I think what she really meant was to see the possibilities clearly, not just the losses." "And what possibilities do you see now?" Melody asked softly. Boone held her gaze. "New ones. Better ones." The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken potential. Then Melody smiled, the expression lighting her face in a way that made Boone's breath catch. "I see them too," she said simply. As they parted ways with a promise to continue their conversation soon, Boone felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in years, the sensation of moving forward rather than looking back. The Martha Hargrove Foundation became his focus in the following months, alongside Hargrove Design's expanding portfolio. The Phoenix Project broke ground with considerable media attention, the innovative family center drawing praise from social service organizations nationwide. Skip Wainwright became the foundation's first major donor. "Martha would have loved this," he told Boone at the groundbreaking ceremony. "She always said you built things to last." The children visited regularly, Emma and Jason thriving under their parents' care, but maintaining a special bond with Uncle Boone. Their presence in his life remained a constant reminder of how unexpected connections could heal old wounds. As for Melody, their relationship evolved with the careful precision of two architects creating something designed to endure, a foundation of friendship gradually supporting more complex emotions. On the anniversary of his mother's death, Boone visited her grave alone, placing fresh flowers against the simple headstone. "I'm looking, Mom," he said quietly, "and I'm building something new." Chapter 8, Reckoning. The Denver Chronicle's headline was stark: "Prescott Caldwell Fraud Case Moves to Federal Court." Boone scanned the article during his morning coffee, noting that the case had expanded to include wire fraud across state lines, significantly increasing the potential sentences for both Valencia and Dax. His phone buzzed with a text from Lucille. "Judge denied separate trials. They'll face charges together despite efforts to distance themselves from each other." Poetic justice, Boone thought. The couple who had conspired to betray him would now be legally bound together throughout their trial and likely incarceration. He set the paper aside, focusing instead on the day ahead. The Martha Hargrove Foundation was hosting its first fundraising gala that evening, a significant milestone in establishing the organization's financial future. As he reviewed his notes for his speech, his phone rang. "Kinsley, I know it's last minute," she began without preamble, "but could the kids stay with you tonight? Drew's mother was supposed to watch them during the gala, but she's come down with something." "Of course," Boone replied, pleased by the prospect. "They can help me prepare for the event." "You're a lifesaver," Kinsley sighed. "I wouldn't ask, but as a board member of the foundation—" "Kinsley," Boone interrupted gently, "you never need to explain. Jason and Emma are always welcome here." After ending the call, Boone sent a quick text to Melody, who'd been helping coordinate the gala. "Kids staying with me tonight. Bringing them to the venue early to help set up. Save them seats at our table?" Her response came immediately. "Absolutely. Emma can help with the flower arrangements. Jason still wants to control the lighting board, still saying no." Boone smiled at their easy coordination. Over the past year, Melody had become not just his business partner and romantic interest, but a significant presence in the children's lives as well. Her natural ability to engage with them had surprised and delighted Boone, adding another dimension to his growing feelings for her. The doorbell announced the children's arrival, both racing into the house with the familiarity of a space that remained partially theirs. "Mom said we get to come to the fancy party," Emma exclaimed, twirling to show off the dress she'd brought for the occasion. "If we behave," Jason added solemnly, though his eyes sparkled with excitement. As they helped Boone gather materials for the gala, Jason grew uncharacteristically quiet. "Everything okay, bud?" Boone asked, catching the boy's troubled expression. Jason hesitated. "Dad was watching the news this morning. I heard them talking about Aunt Valencia." Boone carefully maintained a neutral expression. The children knew Valencia only as a distant relative who had made some bad choices, the sanitized explanation Kinsley had provided. "They said she's going to jail for a long time," Jason continued. "Is that true?" Boone sat on the sofa, patting the space beside him. Jason settled in, his small face serious. "Yes, it's probably true," Boone acknowledged. "Valencia and her friend did some things that broke important laws." "Is that why she's not your wife anymore?" Jason asked. Boone considered how to respond appropriately. "Our marriage ended for many reasons. Sometimes adults grow in different directions or make choices that hurt each other too deeply to repair. Like when Ben pushed me off the swing and didn't say sorry, but way worse," Jason reasoned. "Something like that," Boone agreed, impressed by the child's emotional intelligence. "Are you still sad about it?" Jason pressed. Boone thought carefully before answering. "Not sad exactly. Sometimes I feel disappointed about how things ended, but mostly I've moved forward. My life now, my work, the foundation, having you and Emma visit, spending time with Melody. These things make me happy." Jason nodded, processing this. "Mom says Melody is your girlfriend now. That's between your mom and me," Boone said with mock severity, making Jason giggle. "I like her better than Aunt Valencia," Jason confided. "She listens when I talk about rocks." "She's a good listener," Boone agreed, touched by the simple but profound observation. The gala that evening exceeded all expectations. Denver's elite turned out in force. Their support of the Martha Hargrove Foundation enhanced by the personal connections Boone had cultivated throughout his career. As he surveyed the elegantly decorated ballroom, Boone felt a deep satisfaction. The foundation represented everything his mother had valued: practical support for families in crisis, a commitment to stability and dignity for children caught in difficult circumstances. Melody appeared at his side, stunning in a midnight blue gown. "The donation totaled just past $2 million, she murmured. Skip Wainwright challenged his friends to match his contribution, and they're rising to the occasion. Boone smiled, squeezing her hand gently. Mothers and children have powerful advocates tonight. His speech received a standing ovation, particularly when he spoke about his own mother's struggles and the inspiration behind the foundation. Emma and Jason watched from their seats with undisguised pride, the girl clapping enthusiastically while Jason maintained what he considered a more dignified appreciation. As the evening progressed, Boone was approached by countless well-wishers, including Carlos Castillo and his wife Marlena. "Remarkable achievement," Carlos commented, lifting his champagne glass in salute. "From architectural innovator to philanthropic leader in 1 year." "Necessity became opportunity," Boone replied modestly. Marlena leaned closer, her voice lowered for privacy. "I heard Valencia's attorney reached out to you about testifying to her fundamental decency during your marriage." News traveled quickly in their circles. "My attorney advised against any involvement in the case," Boone said neutrally. "Wise," Marlena nodded. "Though I must admit, I'm curious about your ex-wife's current predicament. Word is that she and Caldwell have turned against each other rather spectacularly." "I wouldn't know," Boone replied truthfully. While he received regular updates on the legal proceedings from Lucille, he had deliberately distanced himself from the personal drama unfolding between Valencia and Dax. "Well, according to my sources," Marlena continued, undeterred, "Caldwell's defense strategy involves painting Valencia as the mastermind behind everything, while her team claims she was manipulated by a professional con man. It's quite the soap opera." Carlos touched his wife's arm gently. "Perhaps not the most appropriate topic, dear, given the circumstances." Marlena had the grace to look abashed. Of course. My apologies, Boone. As they moved away, Melody rejoined him. Everything okay? You look pensive. Just considering how different paths can diverge, Boone said. A year ago, Valencia and I were married, and now you're building something meaningful while she's facing federal charges, Melody finished. It feels like another lifetime, Boone admitted. Is that regret I hear? Melody asked, her voice carefully neutral. Boone turned to face her fully. Not regret. Perspective. Everything that happened, the betrayal, the revenge, the aftermath, it led me here. To this foundation, to a clearer understanding of what matters. His gaze drifted to where the children were charming donors with their enthusiasm. To them. To you. Melody's expression softened. You've come a long way from the man who returned to an empty house after his mother's funeral. We all have, Boone reflected. Even Valencia, though not in the direction she anticipated. The following morning brought an unexpected development. Lucille called as Boone was preparing breakfast for the children. Dax Caldwell is offering a deal, she said without preamble. He wants to provide evidence against Valencia in exchange for a reduced sentence. What kind of evidence? Boone asked, stepping into his study for privacy. He claims Valencia was planning to target your business long before he entered the picture, that she approached him after learning of his background, not the other way around. Boone absorbed this, unsure whether to believe it. Does his story hold water? Partially, Lucille admitted. He has emails dating back further than we previously knew. But there's a complication. He's also claiming you orchestrated their arrest at the Wainwright building as personal revenge, potentially tainting the case with entrapment issues. That could undermine the prosecution, Boone noted, mind racing through implications. Precisely why I'm calling, Lucille continued. The prosecutor wants to know if you'd be willing to testify about your knowledge of their plans, specifically how you learned about the attempted heist. The request placed Boone at a crossroads. Testifying would mean publicly acknowledging his role in bringing down Valencia and Dax, turning private justice in a public record. It would also mean facing Valencia in court, something he'd thus far avoided. I need to think about it, he told Lucille. There are considerations beyond the legal aspects. After ending the call, Boone returned to the kitchen, where Jason and Emma were debating the merits of different breakfast cereals. Their innocent argument grounded him, reminding him that his decisions now affected more lives than just his own. That afternoon, he discussed the situation with Hudson while the children played in the backyard. If you testify, it becomes front-page news again, Hudson cautioned. Everything gets dragged back into the spotlight. Your marriage, the divorce, the revenge plan, which affects the foundation, the firm's public image, and potentially the children, Boone concluded. Hudson nodded. On the other hand, if you don't testify and Caldwell's entrapment claim gains traction, Valencia and Dax might receive reduced sentences or even plea deals, Boone finished. After everything they did, does that matter to you? Hudson asked. Really matter, I mean. You've moved on. Your life is in a better place. Is justice for them still important enough to risk disruption? It was the central question, and Boone took his time considering it. A year ago, I would have said yes without hesitation, he finally answered. Now, I'm not sure revenge still serves any purpose. The person I wanted to punish feels increasingly distant from who I am now. Hudson smiled slightly. Martha would approve of that perspective. Later, as Boone was helping Emma with her homework, his phone rang again, an unknown number from the detention center. Against his better judgment, he answered. Boone, Valencia's voice was urgent. Before you hang up, please listen. Dax is lying about everything. This isn't appropriate. Valencia, Boone replied calmly. Any communication should go through our attorneys. He's claiming I planned it all, she continued desperately. That I targeted you from the beginning, that I married you as part of some long con. You know that's not true. Boone hesitated, aware of Emma watching him curiously. I need to go. Wait. Valencia's voice rose. Just tell the truth, that our marriage was real, that Dax approached me, not the other way around. One statement from you could. Could what? Boone interrupted. Salvage your reputation? Reduce your sentence? Why should I help you now, Valencia? The silence on the other and stretched uncomfortably before Valencia spoke again, her voice smaller. Because once you loved me, and whatever I became at the end, whatever terrible choices I made, there were 15 years before that meant something. The raw honesty in her voice caught Boone off guard. Before he could respond, Valencia continued, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for truth. Just the truth, Boone. After ending the call, Boone sat motionless, Valencia's words echoing in his mind. The children's presence kept him from dwelling too deeply, but that night, after they were asleep, he found himself revisiting the conversation. He called Melody, needing her perspective. If you testify, she said after listening to his dilemma, what exactly would you say? The truth, Boone replied, that I received information about their plans through legitimate channels, that I passed that information to law enforcement, and that their actions were their own. And would that help or hurt Valencia's case? Boone considered this. Potentially both. It would confirm she wasn't the original instigator, which helps her, but it would solidify her willing participation, which hurts her. Then your testimony serves justice rather than revenge, Melody observed. Maybe that's your answer. The next morning, Boone called Lucille with his decision. I'll testify about how I learned of their plans, he told her. But I want one condition. I want 5 minutes alone with Valencia before I take the stand. 2 days later, Boone found himself in a small conference room at the courthouse, waiting for Valencia to be brought in. When she entered, handcuffed and in standard jail attire, the contrast with her former polished appearance was still jarring despite his previous visit to the detention center. 5 minutes, the guard reminded them before stepping outside. Valencia sat across from him, searching his face. You're going to testify? Yes, Boone confirmed. The truth, Valencia. Not to help you or hurt you, but because it's the right thing to do. Relief washed over her features. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Boone cautioned. The truth includes your willing participation after you understood what Dax was planning. Valencia nodded, acceptance replacing relief. I know. I've had a lot of time to think about my choices. So have I, Boone said. About choices, consequences, and moving forward. You've done well with that part, Valencia observed. The foundation, the expansion projects, even those children you've taken under your wing. Kinsley told me. Boone was surprised by this connection. You're in contact with Kinsley? She visited once, Valencia admitted, to tell me she was disappointing me as a cousin as thoroughly as I disappointed her as a role model. The ghost of a smile crossed her face. She also mentioned you're seeing someone. An architect from your firm. Melody. Boone confirmed, seeing no reason to deny it. Is it serious? Valencia asked, something vulnerable in her expression. Boone considered the question. Yes, it's built on something real, mutual respect, shared values, honest communication. All the things we lost along the way, Valencia observed quietly. We never really had them, Boone corrected gently. We build our relationship on appearances and expectations, not authenticity. Valencia looked down at her handcuffed wrists. I realized something during these months in detention. I never really knew who I was outside of other people's perceptions. My family's perfect daughter, your sophisticated wife, Dax's cunning partner. I became whatever reflection seemed most advantageous. And now, Boone prompted. Now I'm trying to figure out who Valencia actually is, she replied. Without the masks, without the expectations. It's harder than I expected. Worth doing, though, Boone said. Their 5 minutes were nearly up. As they prepared to return to the courtroom, Valencia asked one final question. After today, will I see you again? Boone considered this. I don't know. Perhaps when all this is settled, we'll both have clearer answers about what's necessary and what isn't. She nodded, acceptance in her expression. For what it's worth, I think your mother would be proud of who you've become. As Boone took the stand later that morning, he felt a peculiar sense of closure. His testimony was clear and factual, neither vindictive nor protective toward Valencia. He simply told the truth about the information he'd received, the actions he'd taken, and the choices Valencia and Dax had made of their own accord. When the prosecutor asked about his motivations for reporting the potential heist, Boone answered honestly. I believed a crime was about to be committed, and I had a civic duty to report it. And the fact that the suspects included your ex-wife played no role in your decision?" the prosecutor pressed. Boone met Valencia's gaze across the courtroom. "I reported criminal activity. The identity of those involved was secondary to the fact that the law was about to be broken." After his testimony, as he left the courthouse, reporters clamored for additional comments. Boone declined, stating only that justice was being served through proper legal channels. That evening, as he sat on his patio watching the sunset, Boone felt something shift within him, the last weight of his past with Valencia finally lifting. Whatever the outcome of the trial, his part in the story was complete. His phone buzzed with a text from Melody. "Dinner tonight? I have news about the Seattle project." Boone smiled, typing his reply. "My place, 7 p.m. I have news too." As he set his phone down, he noticed Emma's drawing still displayed on his desk, the image of his mother watching over him and the children. The foundation bearing her name was thriving. The children were flourishing, and his personal and professional lives were evolving in ways that felt both challenging and right. Looking with clear eyes, he murmured to himself, raising his glass to the fading light. Chapter 9. Full Circle. 2 years later, Boone stood at the center of a bustling construction site in Phoenix, the framework of the Martha Hargrove Foundation Family Center rising against the desert sky. The project had evolved from its initial concept to become the flagship of a growing network of support centers across the Southwest. Hudson approached, hard hat in hand, satisfaction evident in his weathered face. Ahead of schedule and under budget. Not bad for a passion project. Boone nodded, surveying the site with professional pride and personal investment. "My mother always said, if you're going to build something, build it to last." Speaking of lasting things, Hudson said with a knowing smile, "Have you finalized the plans for Saturday?" Saturday. The word alone quickened Boone's pulse. After 3 years together, he and Melody had decided to marry in a small ceremony at the original Martha Hargrove Foundation Center in Denver, a venue that represented their shared values and vision. "Everything's set," Boone confirmed. "Assuming my best man remembers his responsibilities." Hudson clasped his shoulder. "Rings, speech, keeping you from panicking. I've got it all covered." As they completed their inspection of the site, Boone's phone buzzed with a notification from his home security system. The camera showed Jason and Emma, now 11 and 9, being dropped off by Kinsley. The children spent 1 weekend a month with Boone and Melody, a tradition that had continued even as their parents fully recovered. "Go on," Hudson urged. "I'll wrap things up here. Your family's waiting." Family. The word had transformed for Boone over the past 3 years, expanding beyond blood relations to encompass the connections he'd built through choice and commitment. At home, he found the children already immersed in their usual activities. Jason programming a small robot in the study, while Emma sketched designs for what she called houses for everybody at the kitchen table. "Uncle Boone," Emma called, running to hug him. "I finished my project for the foundation contest." The Martha Hargrove Foundation annually sponsored a design competition for children, encouraging them to envision spaces that supported family well-being. Emma had been working on her entry for months. "Let's see it," Boone encouraged, examining her detailed drawings with genuine interest. At 9, Emma already showed remarkable spatial awareness and creative vision, a budding architect in the making. "The bedrooms all connect to a central garden," she explained eagerly, "so families can have private space but still be connected to nature and each other." "Impressive concept," Boone noted. "Have you shown Melody?" Emma shook her head. "I wanted you to see it first. You always notice the structure stuff." The observation touched him deeply. This child who saw and valued his perspective, who had carved out a distinct relationship with both him and Melody. Jason joined them, robot in hand. "Is Melody coming over tonight? I need help with the programming sequence." "She'll be here for dinner," Boone confirmed. "She's finalizing some details for Saturday." Both children exchanged knowing looks. They were serving as attendants in the ceremony, roles they took with immense seriousness. As he prepared dinner, Boone reflected on how thoroughly his life had transformed. The man who had returned to an empty house after his mother's funeral would hardly recognize the home now filled with children's artwork, architectural models, and the comfortable chaos of family life. The doorbell announced Melody's arrival. Even after 3 years together, the sight of her still caused a particular lightness in Boone's chest, a recognition of something rare and valuable. The caterer confirmed, "The flowers are ordered, and your sister's flight gets in tomorrow evening," Melody reported, kissing him briefly before being enthusiastically greeted by the children. Boone's relationship with his younger sister Leanne had been another unexpected reconstruction of the past few years. After their mother's death, he had reached out to her in California, rebuilding a connection that had frayed during his marriage to Valencia, who had found Leanne's bohemian lifestyle and outspoken nature uncomfortable. "Any word from the prosecutor's office?" Melody asked quietly once the children were engrossed in their projects again. Boone nodded. "The papers came through this morning. The foundation has been approved to expand the reintegration program at the women's facility." The program in question was perhaps the most surprising evolution of the Martha Hardrow Foundation's mission. 18 months earlier, Boone had been approached by the director of the women's correctional facility where Valencia was serving her sentence. "Inmate Prescott has been working with our education department," the director had explained. "She's shown remarkable aptitude for teaching basic financial literacy to other inmates. She's requested permission to develop a full curriculum for women preparing for release." The request had presented Boone with a complex decision. Valencia had received a 6-year sentence, with eligibility for parole after 4 years based on good behavior and cooperation. Supporting her rehabilitation program meant potential ongoing connection, something he had deliberately avoided since the trial. After discussing it with Melody and the Foundation Board, they had approved funding for a pilot program, Financial Foundations for New Beginnings, developed with Valencia's input but administered by professional educators. The program had proven unexpectedly successful, with participants showing significantly lower recidivism rates. The expansion Boone had just received approval for would extend the curriculum to 3 additional facilities. "Will you tell her yourself?" Melody asked, understanding the nuances of the situation. Boone considered this. "I think it's appropriate. It's a foundation decision, not a personal one." Later that week, as final wedding preparations unfolded, Boone made the now familiar drive to the correctional facility. His quarterly meetings with Valencia regarding the program were strictly professional, focused on curriculum development and implementation rather than their shared history. Valencia had changed during her incarceration, not just physically, with her designer clothes replaced by prison attire and her carefully maintained appearance simplified by necessity, but in more fundamental ways. The calculating ambition that had defined her had been replaced by a more grounded sense of purpose. She was already seated in the meeting room when he arrived, a folder of materials prepared on the table before her. "Congratulations on your upcoming wedding," she said as he sat down. Kinsley mentioned it during her last visit. "Thank you," Boone replied, still finding these personal exchanges somewhat awkward despite the time that had passed. "The kids are excited about their roles," Valencia continued with a small smile. "Apparently, Emma has strong opinions about the flower arrangements. She has strong opinions about most design elements," Boone acknowledged, unable to suppress his pride in the girls' developing aesthetic sense. They transitioned to business, discussing the program expansion, reviewing outcomes from the initial implementation, and addressing challenges for the broader rollout. As the meeting concluded, Valencia hesitated before gathering her materials. "I've been approved for early release next year," she said quietly. "Good behavior, program participation." Boone absorbed this information. "Do you have plans for when you're released?" "Mayan has offered me a place to stay in Seattle," Valencia replied. "And there's a nonprofit there doing financial education for underserved communities. They've expressed interest in my curriculum." "That sounds promising," Boone said, genuinely pleased that she had found a constructive direction. Valencia studied his face. "It doesn't bother you? The idea of me being free, starting over?" Boone considered his answer carefully. 3 years ago, it might have. Now, I believe people can change, can rebuild. The foundation is founded on that principle. "Thank you," Valencia said simply, "for seeing that possibility, even after everything." As Boone stood to leave, Valencia added, "I hope you and Melody will be very happy. She seems right for you in ways I never was." The observation held no bitterness, only a quiet recognition of truth. "Be well, Valencia," Boone said, meaning it. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, the Colorado autumn painting the mountains in gold and crimson. The ceremony space at the Foundation Center had been transformed into an elegant but warm setting, with natural elements and architectural details reflecting both Boone and Melody's tastes. As Boone waited at the front of the room, Hudson beside him, he looked out at the assembled guests, colleagues, friends, family members both biological and chosen. Kinsley and Drew sat with their children, who could barely contain their excitement about their roles. Leanne had arrived from California, bringing her characteristic energy and enthusiasm. Skip Wainwright occupied a place of honor in the front row, representing the connection to Boone's mother. When the music began and Melody appeared, escorted by her father, Boone felt a certainty that transcended the moment, a recognition that the path that had seemed so broken 3 years before had led precisely where it needed to. Emma preceded Melody, scattering flower petals with artistic precision, while Jason followed with the rings, his expression solemnly proud. The children had become integral to this new chapter, their presence a reminder of how unexpected connections could heal and transform. During the reception, as Boone danced with his new wife, he caught sight of Emma, showing Leanne her portfolio of house designs. "She's remarkable," Melody noted, following his gaze. "Both of them are. They had good examples of resilience," Boone replied, drawing her closer. "Their parents, you, even me in my way." "Speaking of resilience," Melody said carefully, "have you thought more about Valencia's early release?" Boone nodded. "I spoke with the Seattle nonprofit director yesterday. They're developing a partnership with our foundation to implement Valencia's curriculum in their community programs." Melody smiled, "Building something positive from a difficult history. Very on-brand for you, Mr. Hargrove." "For us, Mrs. Hargrove," he corrected, the new title bringing a smile to both their faces. As the celebration continued around them, Boone reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. The ultimatum Valencia had delivered on the day of his mother's funeral, "Make your choice, me or your dead mother," had seemed at the time to be the destruction of his life as he knew it. In reality, it had been the catalyst for rebuilding something stronger, more authentic, and ultimately more meaningful than what had existed before. Later that evening, as the reception wound down, Boone found a moment of quiet on the center's rooftop garden, a space designed to provide respite for families staying at the facility. The Denver skyline glittered against the night, the Wainwright building prominent among the illuminated structures. Emma found him there, slipping her small hand into his with the easy affection that characterized their relationship. "Are you thinking about your mom?" she asked with a child's directness. Boone smiled down at her. "I am. She would have loved today." Emma nodded solemnly. "She's watching. Like in my drawing." "I believe she is," Boone agreed. "Uncle Boone." Emma's voice took on a more hesitant tone. "Mom said Aunt Valencia might be coming back next year." "Not back to Denver," Boone clarified gently. "She'll be living in Seattle, starting fresh." Emma considered this. "Is that okay? For you and Melody?" Boone knelt to meet her eyes. "Yes, it's okay. People make mistakes, Emma, sometimes big ones. The important thing is what they do afterward, how they learn, how they change, how they try to make things better. Like how you built the foundation after you were sad," Emma reasoned. "Something like that," Boone agreed. "We all have choices about how we respond to difficult things." Emma seemed satisfied with this explanation. "Jason says we should call you Dad now that you're married to Melody." The suggestion caught Boone off guard, emotion rising unexpectedly in his throat. "What do you think about that?" "I think," Emma said thoughtfully, "that families can look lots of different ways. We have Mom and Dad, and we have you and Melody. It's like my house designs, different rooms that all connect." Boone hugged her, marveling at the wisdom contained in her 9-year-old perspective. That's a perfect way to look at it. They rejoined the reception, where Melody and Jason were engaged in an animated discussion about robot programming. Seeing them together, this woman who had become his partner in every sense, and these children who had brought unexpected joy to his life, Boone felt a profound gratitude. The revenge that had once consumed him had given way to something infinitely more valuable. A life rebuilt on foundations of authenticity, purpose, and love. His mother had asked him to look at his life with clear eyes, and at last he truly could. When Valencia eventually called from Seattle the following year, seeking permission to visit the Denver Foundation Center to observe the curriculum implementation, Boone agreed without hesitation. The past no longer held power over his present or future. Funny, he remarked to Melody that evening, how we both made the same choice in the end. What choice? She asked, looking up from the renovation plans they were reviewing at Martha's desk. To honor what matters most, Boone replied. To build something that lasts. As if on cue, the children's laughter echoed from the kitchen, where they were attempting to bake cookies for their weekend stay. A sound that, 3 years earlier, Boone could never have imagined filling his home. Life's ultimatums, he had learned, weren't always what they appear to be. Sometimes they were disguised invitations to build something better from the ruins of what had fallen away, something stronger, truer, and infinitely more valuable than what had been lost. He had made his choice, and so had she, and in the end, they had both found their way home. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen, and I'll see you there.